Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I want you to imagine you had one healthy individual. He's got healthy heart, healthy lungs, healthy liver, healthy kidneys. He's a healthy person. But then you had four unhealthy people. One who needs a heart, one who needs a lungs, one who needs liver, and one who needs kidneys. And they need these things to live. In this scenario, would it be ethical, would it be the moral thing to do to kill that one healthy person, harvest their organs in order to save four people? Isn't this maximizing the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Is it the moral thing to do? So in the first part of this section of Need for Messengers, we spent some time talking about and explaining the fitrah of the human being. The fact that human beings have this innate desire to worship, which was ultimately created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, in this part, I want to expand our understanding of the human nature and explain that not only would our instinct to worship require regulating from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Creator, but also our wider moral judgments we make needs to be guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see, human beings, we've been created with needs and with drives. Other drives other than just seeking to worship. So for example, we have the drive to eat, to drink, to sleep. We also have the drive within us to form relationships with other people, like family bonds, like living and interacting with our neighbors, like engaging in trade, like establishing security and cooperation with other people. How then do we organize these types of relationships? This is part of us. This is what it means to be a human being, to live within a social society, socially with other people and interact. So how then do we regulate these types of relationships? And not just that, but also within human beings, we have this desire to do good. Meaning, we have this desire to seek the moral or ethical value behind the actions that we perform. So this innate desire to be moral, as well as being able, this desire to satisfy our instincts and biological needs by interacting with others, etc. We need to ask the question, how do we do this while still being moral agents? So how do I go out and interact with my family or with neighbors, or how do I interact with the ruler, or how does the ruler interact with me while being moral agents, while being able to be considered moral? Now some people would argue that we innately know whether an act is moral or immoral. We just simply have to observe the act in and of itself. But we need to ask, is it really moral? How do we know that our innate desire or innate feeling that says something is right or wrong is really a moral judgment? Because a moral judgment is an intellectual process. So let me give you an example. Killing. A number of people would normally say, killing is innately wrong. You can't kill. However, when making a moral judgment, we don't just look at the act itself, but also the circumstances behind the action and the motivation of the person or people who've done the action. So if we just say killing is innately wrong, does that mean that if a person who, goes out and intentionally kills another person, out of premeditative intention, would he be considered equivalent, morally equivalent to the one who, accidentally killed a person? Maybe they were driving down the street, the tire burst and they drove into a person. Or what about the person who killed in self-defense? Is he going to be morally equivalent to the one who killed premeditatively, or even the one who killed as an accident? Or what about the state that adjudicates that a person should be killed and executed because he committed murder, as an example, and this is based upon the law of that particular country? Or even if we argue that killing intentionally is always wrong, does that make euthanasia always wrong? Was it wrong for the British to enter the World War II and its soldiers intentionally kill Nazi soldiers? And we haven't even started talking about abortion yet. So this is also another form of intentional killing. And the question then becomes also more than, about whether it's live or not. But the point that I'm trying to say is that if you look at the act in and of itself, You can't say that the act tells us whether it's morally right or morally wrong. So when people turn around and say, oh, you can just tell from your heart, or you can just tell inside of you, or you're born with this innate feeling that something is morally wrong, we don't even look at morality in that way. We don't even look at the action that way. We look at the circumstances, we look at the motivations of the individuals, and then we start to make certain judgments upon that. So it's not the actual moral act that gives us the moral judgment, but it's something else. And in fact, it's what we call the metaphysical principles that we hold. So these are the assumptions that we have about life. And it's these assumptions and this outlook and this moral viewpoint that we have about life, it actually comes before we look at and sense the act. So we have these assumptions about what life should be about, what should be morally good, what should be morally evil, and then place that upon the acts that we sense. For example, euthanasia. So euthanasia, what is that? It's killing somebody because maybe they're terminally ill, or maybe they're in severe pain and they want to die. Is his life, who's in terminal pain, is it worth saving or not? Or is it morally right to allow that person to kill himself, or morally right for him to ask a doctor to kill him? Now this presupposes certain assumptions about morality. One of those assumptions is that this life is about maximizing, or the value of life is about maximizing pleasure and benefit for the individual and minimizing pain. So this is your purpose, and this then forms your moral outlook. So if a person is not maximizing his pleasure because he's in greater pain, so his pain supersedes his pleasure, then really does he therefore see his life as being worthwhile? And therefore, is it a right, is it morally correct in that situation to minimize the pain to kill the individual through euthanasia? This then results in us, constantly scratching our heads, as human beings, trying to work out, is it morally good, is it morally right, is euthanasia right, euthanasia wrong? Some countries say it's allowed, some countries don't say it's allowed. But it shows us this contradictory nature, this problem that we have. Even if we turn around and talk about this maximizing benefit for the majority of people and minimizing pain criteria, then we got that scenario I gave at the beginning about harvesting a healthy person's body in order to save 4 sick people. Well, it follows from this moral outlook of utilitarianism. But it also clearly indicates certain contradictions, because people don't live their life like that. People disagree with that in certain cases anyway, in most cases. But there are also loads of other examples that we can give in order to highlight the contradictions within human beings when they make moral judgments, and therefore the inability for human beings to make moral judgments. For example, bestiality is a classic example. Is it morally right or morally wrong? Now most people probably say, that's disgusting, that's morally wrong. But there are people who actually argue that it's a moral right. And in fact, you've got the problem if you think that it's morally wrong. And in fact, there is an argument that one person proposed, and he said, and he proposed this not to articulate an argument for bestiality, but to show its contradiction. He said, in most societies, murder is considered a greater crime than rape. Yeah. So if the question about bestiality is wrong because you can't get consent of the animal, before the man or woman, whatever, starts doing some dodgy things with the animal, yeah, then did you seek consent to kill the animal and eat its meat? If you didn't believe it was morally right or wrong to seek its consent to kill it and eat it, and that's considered murder, then rape would be of a lesser degree. So therefore the logic would follow that bestiality, being a lesser crime, would be allowed. So he's trying to show and trying to argue the point that actually this doesn't make this is the problem or the contradiction or the inconsistency when human beings make these types of decisions. But there are other people, like the moral philosopher Peter Singer, who actually argues that bestiality should be made legal. Yeah, he actually says it should be made legal. And that to be against bestiality is a form of racism, known as speciesism. Yeah? So he's arguing that actually, why are you being prejudiced against the cat and the dog? Yeah, or the dolphin or whatever it is, the orangutan. if love is love, this is what his argument is. Similarly, the same for moral philosopher who's talking about racism towards animals because you're not allowing bestiality, also argued that it was morally right to kill an unborn child, and it was morally right to kill an infant child as well. So not only is it right to kill an aborted, an unborn child in the mother's womb, but also an infant child outside of the mother's womb. Because he said, look, he's trying to follow this logic and shows a consistency in logic. He said, if you can kill a child that's in the mother's womb, then what's the moral difference between a child that's outside of the mother's womb? People say, well, the child won't live without the mother being inside the womb. He said, would the baby live without the mother if the mother didn't look after the baby? So they said no. So therefore he said, well, if one is acceptable, the other one should be acceptable. So if killing the child inside the mother because it can't live without the mother is acceptable, then killing the child outside of the mother should also be acceptable if the baby can't look after itself without the mother. So here's his argument. So therefore he was trying to provide the moral justification for infanticide. Then you got our favourite atheist, Richard Dawkins, who tweeted about whether a mother should undertake an abortion if they found out that their child had Down syndrome. He said, when he was asked a question from a woman about, if I was pregnant with a Down syndrome baby, I wouldn't know what to do. This is what he said. He said, abort it and try again. It would be immoral. He's not even saying, he's giving it, not just saying it's acceptable. He's saying it's immoral to bring into the world if you have a choice. So it's immoral to have a handicapped or Down syndrome baby. In fact, these types of tweets and justifications and moral perspectives, echoes back to the ideas of eugenics, killing off bad genes from spreading within society or stopping them to spread from the wider society. And this is where you had eugenics programs within fascism and Nazi Germany, etc. But the thing is that we can apply this question on morality on a number of examples or a number of actions. And what we all notice is humans have always differed over this question, whether morality is good or not. And this has always been the case. So even if we go further back and we talk about democracy, today people say democracy is a moral form of government. But in the past, Plato, Socrates and Aristotle argued against democracy, saying it's irrational, it's immoral. Similarly, Aristotle himself, he argued for the morality of slavery. And I could keep giving examples, from homosexuality being considered immoral and unnatural act, to now people considering it moral, to the differences of age of consent, where in the past it used to be as low as 7 or even younger, to now where it has to be 16 or 18 or in some countries higher. Where in the past, homosexuality and or transgenderism was considered an psychological illness, to now people celebrate when little kids are transitioning from one gender to another. So, and even those people who consider incest to be abhorrent now, we don't know whether in the future people will turn around and argue, well, if it's two consenting adults, love is love, isn't it? So when humans want to make morals or seek moral justifications for their actions without the guidance from the Creator, they end up contradicting themselves, changing their moral views over times and places. And thus morality without this anchoring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anchoring to the Creator, makes morality subjective and have no basis. So the only way to satisfy our need to be moral and is to have our actions guided upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. That's therefore we would seek out that guidance. Not only are we seeking out the guidance because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with a desire to worship, but also we're seeking guidance in order to know how to live our life correctly. And it's rational to accept that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created us, each individual, created our needs, our instincts, our desire to be good, then who knows better how a human being should act and function than the one who created that creation in the first place? So rather than leaving humanity to wander in darkness and ignorance of self-contradiction, we look out for a communication on all aspects of our life in order to determine for us how to live our life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Hadid, verse 25, "Indeed we sent our messengers with clear proofs and revealed with them the scripture and the balance, لِيَقَوْمَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, so that mankind may stand up for justice." The purpose of the revelation then and the guidance was that human beings were able to become moral agents.